its money? Let's find out. Where does the state of North Carolina get its money? So, North Carolina has to make a budget, just like the federal government does. They have to account for revenue, that's money coming in. This is state income tax and other things that go to fund state departments, like buying your driver's license. But also expenditures, and that's state expenditures. You know, the two biggest are roads and schools in the state of North Carolina. And so let's get into the biggest sources of revenue to start. So the first term I want to look at with you guys is called intergovernmental revenue. Intergovernmental revenue. A more common term for this is revenue sharing, but intergovernmental revenue just means the federal government allots a certain amount of its budget to each state. And so a part of North Carolina's budget comes from federal government. And then in turn, when we get to expenditures, part of the money that Henderson County has to work with comes from the state. And so, since my salary is a matter of public record, if you would break it down, where does all this money come from? Part of it comes from Henderson County, part comes from the state of North Carolina, and then if you divide that, part of the state's portion of my salary comes from the federal government. So, revenue. And what does the federal portion of that pay for? The largest portions are for social safety nets like welfare, for the roads, and for hospitals. Again, small portion would be state employee salaries. Okay, another source of revenue are state sales taxes. State sales taxes. And that just means when you go to buy something. So this is kind of fun. There are 5 states in this country that don't have a sales tax. That'd be sweet, right? I mean, I'd just be happy if stores would at least put the actual price instead of the pre-tax price on the tax, so I didn't have to do math every time. But nonetheless, there are states that don't have a sales tax, because we talked about the difference between regressive and progressive taxes. And a sales tax is a regressive tax because it hurts the poor more than it would hurt someone who's wealthy. This information is a little dated. There are states that charge way more than 70%. Okay. Also, some state employees contribute to retirement funds. And so the state of North Carolina also has its own bank. And that means that state employees contribute to retirement funds, meaning that a part of my income goes into this bank every month, and the state earns interest and uses that to make investments, and they make money off of my money. And so they use that as part of their revenue. Also, state income tax. I grew up in Tennessee. There is no state income tax in Tennessee. In North Carolina, we have a state income tax that is roughly 6% of your income. So 6% out of every check that you make ever in the state of North Carolina will go to fund the state's budget. So Tennessee doesn't have that. They offset that cost by a higher sales tax. So North Carolina is a progressive income tax. So it's not just a flat fee of 6%. It really depends on how much money you're making. So, and then the next comes from, where do, I guess, local governments get their money? Most of Henderson County's budget comes from the state. The reason we have some nicer things than, say, other neighboring counties would be property tax. That's the biggest one. So if I came from a very poor county, and that meant that we had little in the way of public goods and services. I mean, our local government was very small, and they weren't able to offer a lot because the property taxes The property values in my home county are so low. I mean, you can literally sell a trailer in Henderson County and move to Monroe County, Tennessee, and buy a fancy 3-bedroom on a 2-acre lot. So a little house here gets you a big house for a crop. What does that mean? That means that the property tax base of Monroe County, Tennessee is very low. Ergo, poor Monroe County doesn't have a lot of money because aside from what the state provides, the only difference in counties is the property tax. Most. That's the biggest. Okay, so property taxes again are the biggest. And when we bought our house not too long ago, it was the first house we owned in Henderson County, we were in Transylvania previously, we had to pay a fee called a special assessment. That someone came out and appraised our house and set a value on it, and then determined our tax rate based off that. All right, so other sources of local revenue. Local sales taxes. So when you go to Walmart, a portion of the tax you pay would come from the state. There is another portion of the tax you pay that provides for local government. Also, again, if you get pulled over, and then if you live within the city limits or even within Etowah, and then some of the other municipalities around Henderson County have their own water and utilities. Hendersonville has garbage collection, and of course that all goes into the taxes that you pay that pay for those services. Now, where does the government spend that money? So this money that you're paying in taxes by going to Walmart, by owning property, by paying your state income tax, it all goes to fund various things. One of these, again, I tend to use the term social safety net. You may also see it as entitlement programs. And these are programs that offer health care, nutrition, or even income supplements to families who are below the poverty level. You're sitting in the early college in a program designed to give you 2 years of college education in addition to your high school. And that is subsidized, meaning paid for, by the state of North Carolina. The idea being to make higher education available to more people. And of course, not only that, but you are in a high school, meaning that you're not paying for this either, and that's paid for by the state. We've already talked about that. So subsidized just means to pay for. Okay, so when you think about the biggest budget items for the state of North Carolina, the biggest are the schools and the roads. In that order. And then from there, retirement, hospitals, and prisons. Not necessarily in that order, but schools and roads are the biggest ones. The local governments run the schools. In fact, that's one of the biggest uses of their time is in overseeing the schools. So we have a local board of education, and they oversee the hiring of a superintendent and is accountable to them and oversees the rest of our school system. Local government run fire departments, police. If you call 911, that's local government that will respond. Local government run the water supply. And so if you have city water, that's paid for by your local taxes. as well as sewage and sanitation. Now, one of the neatest things in terms of the Meeting Our Government project, we actually got to go out on a little field trip to see our local sanitation department. Again, being local government, they're super friendly and very responsive, and they'd be glad to offer you a tour of what happens when you flush the toilet. And we got to learn what happens when you flush the toilet and there's some dust. Ends up at that place. And so, really neat. It's not as gross as it sounds. Folks know what they're doing and gave a really fun tour, but that's all run by our local government.